Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, this afternoon. What are we up to this afternoon? Well, we've got, what I've got here is three new or new-ish releases from the English Whisky Company. And the reason that I've chosen to do these this afternoon is to coincide with this. The latest release of the Whisky magazine, the October edition, and if you flip to page number, what's the page number? We'll find it, 64, the tasting section. Yes, you've guessed it. Yet again, they've kindly asked me to review the new releases for October. And so I just thought it was, as I've deliberately kept some of the samples from all the whiskies that I tasted, it would be good, A, to share them with you, and B, to have another look at them and see if the scores that I gave them in the magazine tasting, were fair, shall we say? Well, I mean, they were fair at the time. That was my impression of when I tasted them the first time around. So it'd be interesting to see if they, if they taste exactly the same. I mean, I'm not going to say that they've radically changed. Obviously, they've not. But as you know, when it comes to tasting whiskey, there are a lot of other factors involved. Sometimes you'll taste the same whiskey on two separate occasions, and you'll pick up sort of different elements from the whiskey. Sometimes it'll depend upon what you've eaten, what you've had to drink, what time of the day it is. All these kind of things have an effect on your palate. So yeah, so there we have it. We'll crack on, and I'll introduce this afternoon's little lineup. Right, okay, so the first one we'll be looking at is called Distillers Elect. I can see the play on words. It's a selection by David Fitt, the distiller, at the distillery. Don't know what the cask makeup is. It's probably a selection of whatever he feels like is good to go, and vats it all together and bottles it at 46%. Now, this particular bottling, I'm guessing he batched the small batches. It's only available if you actually visit the distillery, and I think it costs about £45. So, not too expensive, and we'll see how that one shapes up. This is Chapter 7. Now, originally Chapter 7 was released back in 2012, and it was the Rum Finish they did. I forget how old the spirit was. It was probably about sort of, I think, what, 4 or 5 years, about 4 years old, something like that, 5 years old, and was finished for 6 months in ex-rum casks and bottled at 46%. I would imagine, as this was, submitted to the Whisky magazine, that this is a second release of this particular whisky. So I remember the first release being quite pleasant. So it'll be interesting to see what this is like. And finally, we have the second release of Chapter 13, bottled at 45%. Now, the first release was back in Halloween last year, in actual fact, and it came with a specially designed label, looking all Halloweeny and gothic and what have you, and was actually a pretty damn good whisky, it has to be said. Either finished or matured in sherry casks, I forget exactly which. But this is the second release that they have done of this particular whisky, and so it's got an awful lot to live up to. So anyway, so there you have it. That's this afternoon's little lineup, and we'll start with the Distillers Elect. Right, okay, so Distillers Elect. I mean, okay, I can see the point of the name, but well, okay. So let's focus on the quality of what's in the glass rather than the name, then, shall we? So anyway, let's see what the nose gives us. It's quite sweet. Got some pleasant barley, a lot of oak. I think that was one of the things that I mentioned in the whiskey magazine tasting. I mean, it's got some freshness. I think there's a little bit of sherry notes coming through. There's some nice dusty barley. Bit of sweetness. There's a bit of, I mean, there could be a bit of, there's a little, maybe some dried fruit, maybe there's a bit of, maybe there's a bit of pork cask in there, I don't know. I mean, it's pleasant, it's pretty oaky. Yeah. Palate. Again, it's really oaky, very sweet. I'm getting on obvious oak vanillins, American oak vanillins. There's a honeyed sweetness, possibly, maybe even sort of sauternes, possibly. Yeah, because it's got a lot of honey, a little bit of bittering at the end, and it's, I mean, it's pleasant spirit, no doubt about that. Just all oak, a lot of oak characters. Not getting so much of the actual distillery character, the spirit character. And I mean, you know, I've tasted Chapter 14, which is the current release of the unpeated spirit they do, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it really is good. I mean, it's showing some lovely maturity now, and it's got that sort of classic, well, not classic English character, he says. I mean, there's not exactly an awful lot of English distilleries, so you can't sort of say, well, there's an English character. But it has a lovely sort of barley-led character, sort of softness. You know, I think sort of Chapter 14 is absolutely fantastic. But coming back to the Distillers Elect, I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess sort of like for the money, not bad at all. I just sort of personally preferred a little bit more character from the spirit to come through. But anyway, yeah, so I think it's not a bad start, I should say. Okay, so on to Chapter 7, the rum finish. Again, it's very heavy on the oak. Lots of dried fruit, sort of, you know, that kind of sultanery, not sherry dried fruit, but sultanery, rummy fruit. Again, some nice barley, a little bit of citrus. There's a real dense nose. I mean, I forget what score I gave it in the magazine, so you'll just have to bear with me a second while I find that information. Yeah, what did I? Yeah, 7.5. Yeah, I mean, that kind of puts it in the sort of like the average kind of category. There's a little bit of burnt toffee. There's a bit of freshness there, a bit of grass. No, not grassiness. Barley. Yeah, again, it's pleasant, but I think again, it's a lot of oak, a lot of wood character. Palate. Again, very front loaded. A lot of the rum cask, a lot of the sweet dried fruits, honey, a bit of barley. The freshness does kind of kick in at the finish. It does finish actually really quite fresh. But I'm just not getting progression. I'm getting kind of like big oak and rum finish, and I'm getting cask right at the front, and then suddenly it sort of like goes, you know, I'm kind of not getting it. Kind of, sort of stops and starts again, if you see what I mean. Which isn't bad. I mean, you know, it's not a bad whiskey by any stretch of the imagination, but and it's got a nice cleansing finish, which is what I like when it comes to, you know, wood finished whiskies. I don't want a sort of like a sweet cloying kind of finish, and it certainly does finish nice, dry, crisp, flinty. So, so yeah, it's okay, I think. Okay, and finally, chapter 13, which just have a quick look at my notes. I think is completely aged in sherry. I mean, it's certainly got a nice dark colour, but not overly dark. So let's see what the nose gives us. Oh, that is nice. That is a lovely nose. Really nicely balanced. I'm getting dusty, winey dried fruits from the obvious sherry cask, but I'm getting citrus, vanilla, a little bit of honey, gristy, almost perfumed barley, white fruits, a little bit of toffee. Oh, that is gorgeous. That is beautiful. That is balanced. That is, you know, absolutely wonderful. Obviously, if that's been aged in 100% aged in sherry cask, obviously they've used refilled sherry casks, because it's not kind of blanketing completely. It's just really nicely balanced. I mean, yeah, a little bit of almost rummy fruit now. Sort of again more in that kind of dried sultana, rather than sort of like raisinated fruit that you tend to get with sherry. A little bit of pineapple, coconut. Am I getting, wow? You know, God, yeah, I mean, this is just getting really complex. And like I said, I think that the English whiskey is just really starting to mature amazingly well. Like I said, I think chapter 14 is, although it's only I think about 6 years old, it's certainly starting to display the maturity of an 8-year-old, which I'm guessing is going to be down to the fact that obviously it's slightly warmer in Norfolk. Certainly if you watched the interview that I did with the guys at the distillery, that was one thing that they emphasised, the fact that the loss to the Angels is slightly higher than it is in Scotland, but that means that they get, you know, a quicker maturity or maturation period, and I think it's certainly starting to sort of, you know, from the aromas, feel like about sort of like an 8-year-old whiskey. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Oh. Oh, that aftertaste is absolutely gorgeous. So it kind of opens up with a little bit more raisinated, toffeed, caramelly, coffeed fruit, and then you're getting sort of the fruit, the apricots, pineapple, a little bit of nuttiness coming through. These are all obviously the sort of the esters, the fermentation esters coming through, and then right in the end I'm getting this real herbal, almost herbally rye kind of character, and it certainly reminds me, if you remember when I did the second part of the tasting that I partially filmed at the distillery, and I tasted David's experimental rye mash. It's certainly got a little bit of that kind of element to it. Obviously there's no rye in there because it's a single malt, but it's just got that kind of herbally kind of character on the finish, real intensity. Chewy, malty, really, really lingers. I mean, yes, the chapter 13 isn't particularly cheap. I mean, it's 60 something pounds, I believe. But oh, it's fabulous, and I think sort of, you know, if people are still undecided about English whiskey and you know, not tasted it, then, you know, tasting Chapter 13 is just sort of, yeah, just shows how good the spirit is they're distilling it down in Norfolk, and absolutely fantastic. So yeah, love that. That's a lovely whiskey to finish with. Right, okay, so let's sum these up, although kind of sort of summed them up as we were tasting. So, but anyway, the Distillers Elect. Well, yeah, I mean it's not too bad. It's pleasant whiskey. It's heavy on the wood. I'm guessing it's, like I said, it's probably a selection of spirit that's, well, what I would guess anywhere between sort of 3 and 5 years old. That's probably a bit older than that, actually. Probably four to six, maybe. I don't know. Certainly didn't have that kind of high-tonedy character of some of the earlier bottlings, sort of 3 and 4, or chapters 3 and 4. So I'm guessing it's a little bit older than that. But I'm guessing that all the different cask types that David has picked to sort of like vat in for this has just kind of, you know, shifted the emphasis more towards the cask rather than the actual spirit. And although I don't think it's a particularly bad whiskey, it's not one that I feel that I kind of warm to. And to a certain extent, you could say that about Chapter 7. Again, very heavy on the rum finish, and it didn't quite have the flow that I remember that the original bottling of Chapter 7 had. It's kind of a bit jerky. It kind of delivers, you know, a lot up front on the initial hit, and then there's not really a great deal of progression. Yes, you know, the crisp kind of character, the alcohol, and the sort of slight minerality kind of comes through, freshens the finish, but it kind of like goes bang bang almost. You know, it's almost I just think, like I say, I just think it just lacks that sort of progression. And although it's certainly not a bad whiskey, again, it's not one that I particularly warmed to, which is why I think the score that I gave it in the Whiskey magazine was what it was, because I think it has its shortcomings, but yet overall I don't think it's a particularly bad whiskey at all. Whereas I think I gave the Chapter 13, I think I gave it an 8.8, I think, something like that. Just bear with me a second and I'll tell you. Just talk amongst yourselves, all right? No, I actually gave it a 9, would you believe it? And I think that is testament to the quality of the spirit that David is producing down in Norfolk, and given it a bit of maturation, subtle sherry, it just shows that you know, you get good spirit, and sort of you just enhance it with a bit of sherry. It can just sort of taste absolutely wonderful, and I think that is an absolutely stunning whiskey, and I defy anybody else to say otherwise, to be honest with you. So yeah, lovely whiskey to finish with, and you know, definitely worth a 9 out of 10 in my opinion. So there you have it. This is that wraps up this week's episode of the show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll go out and purchase a copy of the Whiskey magazine and read all my tasting notes, because you know, I've worked hard to get them in there, and it's really nice to finally see almost my entire tasting notes in print, although one or two were edited down, shall we say, a little bit. No clues as to which one, but that's always the way of these things. But by and large, so you know, big thank you to the Whiskey magazine for, you know, giving me the opportunity to appear in print, and obviously a big thank you to the English Distillery for sending them the samples, you know, in that kind of circuitous route. So anyway, yeah, enough waffling for today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the show, and all I basically have to say is go get yourself a bottle of Chapter 13 pronto. Good afternoon.